Tag Demment, head of APLU's international programs. Thanks for joining us in a video version of Inside APLU. To kick things off, why don't you give us an overview of the type of work and initiatives that the international programs undertakes here at APLU?
Well, international programs is part of almost all aspects of what higher education is about. It's about curriculum, it's about extension, it's about research, we are involved in almost all of those. Today, in a globalized world, international is and should be a component of what we do as universities. I mean, universities, in order to be successful, have to be global institutions today. So international is well integrated into all of those. And so we're working on things as disparate as the immigration bill and its impact on higher education, one end of the spectrum, to actually development issues in places like Africa.
Speaking of Africa, I understand that you recently took a trip there. Can you talk about what you did while you were there?
Yes. What I did is I'm an advisor for one of our 11 partnerships between U.S. universities and African universities that we've developed under what's called the Africa-U.S. Higher Education Initiative. Our member institutions have a long history of working in developing countries as partners, helping to build institutional and human capacity so that developing countries can solve their own problems and don't necessarily have to rely so much on outside inputs in terms of technological assistance and other issues. So we have created this initiative for Africa for a number of reasons. Africa has been somewhat neglected in focus of much of our development assistance over the years, but Africa is rising. Africa as a region has one of the highest GDP growth rates of any region in the world. It has a burgeoning population of people, the projections of 9+ billion people on the planet by 2050. Half of those will be Africans. We've invested heavily in primary and basic education in Africa, and those students are all looking to go to higher education, or many of them are. And the capacity of African institutions to absorb them is questionable at this point, and we are very much focused on trying to help build that capacity. In fact, USAID has contracted with us to write a strategy paper for higher education for Africa. And if we can educate Africans and have that education be relevant to their economic development, then we could see Africa become a real economic power. But if we neglect that and the students who are unable to enter higher education, unable to create the jobs and businesses that are needed to transform the economies, then we're probably facing a lot of instability, and the costs for the U.S. will come in other forms.
So on this most recent trip to Africa, can you talk about some of the things you saw and some of the things that have changed maybe in the last 5, 10, 15 years?
Well, I've been going to Africa for over 40 years, and the changes are remarkable. In specific terms, in terms of our partnerships, what we're doing is we're working on a given problem. In the case of the relationship that I was just on in Uganda, it was between North Dakota State University and Makerere, and it has to do with animal diseases. They're putting together a network of African universities and government agencies to deal with the zoonotic disease issues. Zoonotic diseases are diseases that we get through our contact with animals. Things like avian flu, for example, is a major, and there's a big focus on this in East Africa. So we're building that capacity. We're helping to train people. We are an outside agent, which has many advantages. It allows us to suggest changes that probably would be hard to initiate from inside of institutions.
And lastly, can you just kind of tell us where you see these international programs heading in the next few years as well? What can we look forward to?
Well, I think one of the big things we can look forward to is that, particularly on the development side, is that USAID has re-engaged with U.S. universities. That's one thing, in many different forms. And I think this is very healthy both for our institutions and it's very healthy for USAID, because development is in a sense a science. And the more we can have our research and technology components from our university engaged in that, that's very positive. I am concerned about how much capacity we're building in developing countries. We used to be very, very active in that. 15,000 students a year getting master's and PhD students degrees in our institutions. But that has really diminished over the years, and we need to build that back up. It's not only good for developing countries, it's very good for our institutions because it gives us an international flavor. It's very good for our country because those people usually end up as ministers of agriculture or presidents of countries, and frankly, they all have had very, very positive relationships with their institutions and are very positive and pro-American in their dealings.